All right, this is Colton Fagundes. I'm with American Sustainable Business Council. Thank you, everybody, for joining today. This webinar is part of a two-part series on advocating on clean water issues. And so this one will be focused on advocating and lobbying your elected officials. So we've got a couple of great panelists today and myself. We're going to start out, we have Millie Smith. She was first elected as a state representative in Delaware in 2002. She's been on multiple committees. 2018, she left the state legislature, and she now is the founder and CEO of Sustainable World Strategies and also the Delaware Sustainable Business Council. She's been a great partner for me in our Delaware River Basin regional campaign for clean water. And she's going to speak today on advocating your state officials. We'll have Frank Knapp, who is President, CEO of the South Carolina Small Chamber Business Chamber of Commerce. He has played an influential leadership role in making South Carolina more energy conservant, socially responsible, and small business friendly. He also has a seat on our board at ASBC and founded the Business Alliance for Protecting the Atlantic Coast. So I'm Colton Fagundes. I'm at ASBC, and sorry, actually forgot I need to briefly introduce what American Sustainable Business Council is for all those who might not be aware. We are a national organization representing over 250,000 sustainable and responsible businesses. We advocate on a variety of issues, environmental and also in the hybrid workplace for a more sustainable and just economy. And we are a membership-based organization. So if anyone is currently on this webinar that is interested in becoming a member, don't hesitate to go to our website afterwards or get in contact with me for more information. So to get us started, Millie Smith. There you are.
Wonderful. Thanks, Colton. Can everyone hear me okay? I am going to assume yes. So I'm looking forward to chatting with you briefly today about lobbying successfully in your state or local legislatures. As Colton mentioned, I was a state representative in Delaware for the past 16 years. And I wanted to talk to you about a handful of things today. First, so you have an issue, where do you start? Who do you reach out to? What the most effective way to communicate is? What material is most persuasive to the policymaker? What the best ask is? And then finally, following up. Okay. So where do you start? The first issue is you want to know exactly what you want out of this. So I'm going to walk you through an example right now related to water. In Delaware, there is actually a bill, the Delaware Clean Water Act. And there's a lot of people that are interested in it, but let's say one of those people is you. First thing you're going to want to do is know exactly what you want from the legislature. So in this case, the Delaware Clean Water Act sets up a mechanism to develop a large fund for our waterways in Delaware. So really, it's money that this legislation is seeking. So you want to keep that in mind, because as we go through the process, you may come across opposition, you may come across legislators or other policymakers that want to try to change the legislation. And you can be open to that as long as you have your bottom line in mind. So you're going to want to do your research on the issue, know the benefits. What are the benefits of having this fund for clean water in Delaware? But then it's just as important to know what the opposition is going to say, why they'll say it, and then what your response is to it. You don't want to pretend like, what you're coming to the legislature with is all, fairy dust and gold. You want to be real, and you want to share with them, look, here are the benefits of it, but this is what so-and-so, the opposition, is going to say to you, and here's why their arguments don't stand up, or here's a reason, why you don't need to be concerned about their arguments. So if you can negate the opposition right from the get-go, you will take away a lot of their power. So you also want to do some research in terms of who else is in support of what you're trying to get. Look at other cities, other states, other countries even. Have other jurisdictions done what you wanted to have done, and what are the outcomes of that? Has it been a tremendous success? Have other states set up these clean water funds, and what's been the result of it? Are there public figures that have spoken out on the issue, whether it's politicians, whether it's actors, whether it's any other kind of community leader or public figure that you can think of? Having folks on your side will certainly help. And then third, you want to identify locally any other public allies or coalitions who have goals similar to yours. So for example, in Delaware, there actually are a group of nonprofits that have gotten together in a Clean Water Alliance, and they're all working together to try to pass this legislation. You could reach out to that coalition, find out how you can be a part of it, ask how you can help. If there's not that kind of coalition, which in this case makes it relatively easy to join in and lend your support, you want to do a little additional research just to figure out, is there a specific nonprofit that supports the work that you're trying to do? Is there, does the Attorney General have this on his or her radar screen, or any of the local civic alliances or business alliances, and then the couple other commissioners or state treasurer? Any one of them, if you can do the research and ascertain whether they're interested in what you're interested in, that's going to be helpful for you. So next, who do you start with? Two choices. You can reach out to the executive branch or the legislative branch. If you reach out to the legislative branch initially, you're going to want to identify exactly what legislators would be interested in hearing from you. Who's going to be most receptive to you? I've listed in order of priority what I think the most important would be. If you could get leadership interested in what you have to say and the cause that you have, that's going to be the most helpful ultimately for passage and for getting what you want. So leadership would be like the Speaker of the House, the President Pro Tem of the Senate, the majority or minority leader, the whip, etc. That's leadership. Then you have committee chairs. So let's take the water example that I was giving you, the Delaware Clean Water Act. Most likely that's going to go into a committee that was going to be our environmental committee, either in the House or the Senate. You can do the same thing with the issues that are important to you. Figure out what type of committee is this going to go into. Is it criminal justice? So it'll go into either a criminal justice or a judiciary committee. Is it related to health and social services? Then it'll probably go into a health committee or education, etc. In Delaware for sure, and I'm not 100% certain how other states or other jurisdictions work, but legislators have an opportunity to self-select what committees they want to be on. Oftentimes, if there's too many legislators that want to be on a certain committee, then leadership will make the ultimate decisions. But usually, especially in the case of a committee chair, that person is interested in the subject area of that committee. So they're often a good place to start. If you can get a committee chair interested in what you're trying to do, then you have even more likelihood of success. Then the committee members, if you can't get the committee chair's attention or their ear for a meeting, then a committee member would be the next best opportunity. Lastly, your own representative, senator, council person, these folks work for you. And I know that when I was a legislator, if I had anybody that reached out to me and indicated they were a constituent, I would immediately meet with them regardless what it was about. If they wanted to talk about legislation, we would talk about legislation. If they had ideas for legislation, we would talk about that, because I work for them. And I think most legislators or council people presumably feel the same way. So if you want to work with the executive branch, or if you want to simultaneously go to the executive branch, you can either call the executive's office and ask to speak with their staff person, or you could reach out to the cabinet agency for the subject material, in this case, water, would go into the Department of Natural Resources and Environmental Control and ask for a meeting with one of their high up policy people or staff people. So once you've determined who you want to reach out to, what's the most effective way to communicate? Number one, hands down, in person. Legislation, I think, like most other things in life, are oftentimes based on relationships. And when you have a live human being in front of you talking to you about why something is important, it's going to register, I think, a little bit more personally and a little bit more strongly than any other mechanism. And how do you meet with your legislators in person? Many of them at the local level will have weekly or monthly coffees where you can just show up and talk to them about anything you want. You could reach out to their office and ask for an in-person meeting, come meet with them at their office. You know, if you're aware that they're going to be at an event locally, you could go to the event and try to catch them before or after the event. But in person is definitely the number one option. Next would be by phone, because again, that's slightly more personal than the email or letter. If you are going to write an email, you want to make sure that you identify, if you are a constituent of theirs, you want to identify that you're a constituent. If you're, for example, a member of a board of directors for a nonprofit that's, you know, lobbying in favor of a particular piece of legislation, you might want to consider stating in there what your day job is or what your retired day job is. So, for example, a lot of nonprofits have, you know, retired executives on their either current executives or retired executives on their boards. That's important. You want to gain some immediate credibility from the legislators, many of whom are receiving hundreds of emails a day. And I used to go through all of mine individually. Some have staff members that do it. But regardless, if you can identify, you know, that you were CFO or a CEO or that you were a bank manager or whatever, you know, whatever your responsibilities were or are at your job, that will add credibility to what you're asking for. And then I think Colton's going to talk a little later about the social media. So what's most persuasive to a policymaker? Real people, hands down, with a story to tell. When I was chair of the Joint Finance Committee, we always used to have a public hearing section of our hearings where any member of the public could come testify. And when the public testified and shared with us the situations that they faced based on either horrible programming or really good programming or what wasn't working or what was working, that really made us sit up and take notice. Same thing when I had folks come to my office, if I had actual people that were impacted by the legislation that they were coming to promote, that was incredibly effective. So for example, if you're listening to this webinar and you're on a nonprofit board of directors, yes, it's important to have the staff of the nonprofit come down and maybe even some of the board members. But to me, the most effective advocate or lobbyist for your cause is going to be somebody that's directly impacted by it. So let's say that there's in Delaware, there was a water contamination downstate by some of the agricultural runoff. Well, maybe you bring to the legislature a couple of those families to talk about how life has been impacted for them since they've no longer been able to use their local water, what it's like having to use bottled water for everything, including brushing your teeth, et cetera, et cetera. It's those real personal stories that I think make it relatable to the legislator. Next, you're going to want to try to relate to the policymakers. So do your research. Figure out, is there anything in the legislator's background that you could relate to with respect to your issue? So for example, in this day and age, you can look people up on LinkedIn or otherwise and identify, did this person, major in the environment, as their major when they were in college? Did they get a graduate degree in, criminal justice or whatever it might be? But if you can relate to the policymaker, that'll establish a connection that connection will help get you further for what you're looking for. You want to, I know I need to talk quickly because I've only got a minute or two left here, but you want to talk about how your issue and its solution aligns with the interests of the policymaker and his or her district. That's really important, because no matter how great an idea you have, if it's not going to matter to the people of your legislator's district or the person you're speaking with, then it's going to be a harder sell. Which is why if you go to a committee chair or leadership, they're generally trying to do things that are in the best interest of the whole state. And so if you've got an issue that's going to benefit people, you know, that live quite far away from where you do in your state, then you might want to try to talk with the legislators that are whose constituents are actually impacted by your legislation. Nail your research. If it's going to be easy to pass this, if there's not a lot of opposition, make sure that the legislator knows that going into this. Next. So what's the best ask? Number one, make sure you have an ask. Don't just go and talk, you know, a legislator's ear off and then leave without specifically asking for something. Even if it's, can I call you in 1 month to find out if you've made a decision whether you'll sponsor this? You need to leave with some sort of follow-up and some sort of what you've specifically asked the legislator if they'll do. You know, whether it's sponsoring legislation, whether it's sponsoring an amendment to existing legislation, whether it's opposing existing legislation. You want to ask them for something. Provide them bullet points to support your cause, provide them bullet points to oppose the opposition. And if you can actually draft the legislation, if you've got lawyers on your board of directors that would be willing to draft legislation that you can just give to the legislator, that makes it even easier for you. Next. Follow-up, letters and postcard campaigns can be very effective. Same thing with emails and calls, social media. If you've got a large number of people calling into a legislator or a group of legislators about a specific issue, they're going to take notice of that. And so that's why I said the squeaky wheel gets the oil at the beginning, the title of this presentation. It's because really the more frequently people contact their legislators about the same issue or the same piece of legislation, the more likely it is that issue will get heard. Definitely follow up, write a handwritten thank you note, get to know the staff. They can be your biggest allies. Even if you can't get a follow-up meeting with the legislator, you can still call the staff person and find out, hey, can you check with the legislator and find out if they're going to sponsor this for me? Staff can be a big help for you. Next. I think that's it. Thank you.
Melanie, thank you very much. This is Frank Knapp. Colton, you there?
Yes, sorry, I was speaking on mute. Sorry, Frank, before you get started, I wanted to go over a couple logistical things that I forgot to go over at the beginning of the webinar. At the end of the webinar, there will be an opportunity for questions. If you look on your, there should be a bar near the bottom of your screen that has a box for Q&A. If you could just leave any questions you have there. There's also a chat box. Please try to refrain from asking any questions in that chat box, but you can use that to let us know if there's any problems with the audio or anything like that. And all right, Frank, take it away.
Well, thank you, Colton. I appreciate it. And welcome to everybody on the webinar. I'm Frank Knapp. I'm the president and CEO of the South Carolina Small Business Chamber of Commerce. I also have been on the board of directors for the ASBC, I don't know what is 2012 or something, 2011. Have been involved a great deal with advocating in Washington as well as, of course, here in South Carolina. So I do have some experience in working Congress. Specifically, a lot of it is with my own delegation from South Carolina. But Melanie's done a great job of laying out probably most of the points that I would also make that are applicable to to going to Washington to meet with your congressman. If you've never done this before, if you've never sat down with your congressperson or in their congressional offices, you will be nervous. That's good. I think that means hopefully you will prepare. And the way you best prepare is to know your issue well. Get the information you need. Work with some national organizations that also support your position. Gather information from them, and how that issue impacts your state or your community. So it's important to know that a lot of times, and Melanie was probably never like this, but you, if you're sitting with your congressperson, may know more about that issue than your congressperson. They have a lot on their plate, and they can't have the details of all issues. So you need to know that. Now, the staff is a different story. They probably have prepared, and they probably know as much or maybe even a little bit more than you do. So keep that in mind, that you may not be telling them anything they don't know, and they probably tried to prepare their member of Congress for the meeting if they had time, or maybe not. So you need to do your homework and know the congressperson, where they are on the issue. Have they made any public comments about it? This is what you're going to use when you are making your presentation. You would need to know, are they a friend, are they neutral, or they don't agree with you? And depending on all that will depend on how you do your presentation. But I would say that it's extremely important for you to get to know the staff of your member of Congress, either the national staff person handling the issue or the state staff person handling the issue. They are the gatekeeper. Literally, if the staff thinks that you are knowledgeable and that you can provide some good information, and they do want to hear from the constituents if you are a constituent, and make sure they know that if you're a constituent. But they also want to know that you're not crazy, and I don't use that term lightly. They are very protective of their congressperson. And they are not going to put that person in a position where they are trapped with somebody who is not going to represent themselves well and is going to waste the time of the congressperson. So the staff is going to be your gatekeeper. I would get to know them as soon as you can of who's the handling now that issue, either to the national or state level, and get to know them. Ask for an in-person meeting then after you get to know them, and you want to have an in-person meeting with your congressperson either in Washington or in your state. If they say they would like to meet you and they want to do it in their office in Washington, you better be prepared. You better be prepared to figure out how you're going to get there on the day and time that they would offer to see you. I do not know that I would say to them, I can't make it, or I just wait till he or she is in the district. If they're giving you an opportunity to go to D.C. To meet with them, take it. If you have others that should be at that meeting, provide names. If they refer you to the congressperson's scheduler, either for a meeting at Washington or in his home in the district, that's a good thing, because they wouldn't be referring you to the scheduler if they didn't intend to want to give you a meeting. So that's a very good thing. I'll give you an example of the point regarding take the meeting whenever they offer it. A month or so ago, I made a call or contacted somebody in Senator Schumer's office on an issue that I wanted to have input on that the Senator Schumer was proposing. And the staffer in charge of that issue, I told them I would like to have a meeting opportunity, and they said, how about next Wednesday? I didn't flinch. I simply said, great. And then I had to make it happen. But it is important. These meetings are, if you can get these meetings, they are important. They're showing you that they have respect for you, and they're going to give you that opportunity to come in and speak with the member of Congress. Now, if you ask for a meeting with a member of Congress and you cannot get it, then ask, of course, for the meeting with the staffer. It is not unusual that you cannot get a meeting with a member. They are extremely busy. There are a lot of people beside you who would like to get with them, and they have to go to meetings. They have to, do this, that, and the other thing. They travel. If you have a need to engage on this issue relatively soon, a month, 2 months, you may not be able to get a meeting with them. But the staff is good also. Sometimes you can have great success working with a staffer, and they will let you know sort of where the congressperson is and what type of opportunity there might be for you. But regardless of who you meet with, look, they are giving you the opportunity to take their time and engage you. Their time is precious, both the staff and the member of Congress's time. It's very, very precious to them. So be prompt, be early, always courteous, always respectful of the length of time you're given. So you might want to ask up front, how much time do we have for this meeting? Typically, it would be 30 minutes. That's it. That covers everything. 30 minutes, hello, how things going? How's your family? Yada, yada, yada. Or maybe that's just a South Carolina thing where we like to do that. But you got 30 minutes, and then they're gonna move on. And if you try to go over that, they will let you know that meeting that they have to move on. So be prompt, courteous, and respectful of the time. When you actually do sit down with either the staff or the member of Congress, you've not only you got to know the issue well, but you want to be passionate about that issue, both from a business perspective, it's important to you, and possibly even a personal perspective, and that's both of those things. And I think that Melanie articulated how important it is to personalize some of these positions on issues. Be concise with your concerns. Don't ramble. Know what you're going to say. Be concise and what you want Congress to do to solve the problem. Whether the problem is block legislation, pass legislation, budget issue, whatever it is, be concise in what you want them to do. And if the congressperson has made comments or you know what their position is, then you need to use that. If they're on your side, good, play that up. You don't have a hard sell. If for some reason they are not, and they're still giving you an audience, that's good. Be respectful in your disagreement and explain why you disagree with them and why it's important that they not hold that position and that you hope that they will change their position. And if you're reading along on the screen, you can see that I managed to forget a part of that last sentence, so I apologize. But as Melanie indicated, you have got to ask for what you want. And she's absolutely right. If you go into a meeting and you do everything you want to present and you walk out feeling good and you've not asked them to do something, well, if you don't ask, you're not going to get. They may not want to comply with your ask, but at least they know what it is. And so be prepared with a specific ask that's within their power, okay? Don't go to member of Congress and say, please change Donald Trump's mind on something. Just, say what you can legitimately expect that they will be able to do, whether it's a vote, whether it's some type of committee, whatever it is. If they need to contact a agency and raise an issue, be specific with your ask. At the end of the meeting, again, thank them, be gracious. You can leave information if you have it, along with your contact information that they should already have. But sometimes other staffers might come into the meeting that you have not talked to. So make sure, by the way, you get all the business cards, okay? So get all the business cards and give them your business card so that you all can be in contact. And then, of course, after the meeting, you want to follow up with a thank you. I do it with an email. I don't handwrite thank you, but I guess that would be a very nice touch. They wouldn't be able to read my writing. So you're thanking the staffer. Unless you have a personal relationship with the member of Congress, you're not going to be sending them an email. you're going to talk to the staffer, because the staffer was the key for really you getting in there, and offer to answer any other questions that they may uncover as they move forward on this issue. And then if there was a game plan at the end of the meeting where they said a vote's going to happen, or a committee meeting is going to happen, or something's going to happen that you are interested in and you're asking them to do something, remind them of what you wanted to what you wanted to talk to them about before that event, and then follow up after the event to see how things are going, and what other course of action that you might be needed to move your issue forward. So I think that's it. You just, it's good to be nervous if you've never done this before, but the more you know and the more you prepare for the meeting, the less nerves that you'll have. And remember, if you get a meeting with either the member of Congress or the staff, they are giving that to you not because they think you're going to be a pain. They're giving it to you because they think that there is some type of relationship that they want to have with you. Even if it's them trying to persuade you that you're wrong on the issue, nevertheless, you've opened up a dialogue. And whether it be on this issue that you specifically are talking to them about, or an issue down the road, you have established some type of meaningful relationship specifically with the staff that you can follow up on in the future on something else. And so that's why I think the staff is just so important, because when I want to get into talk to a congressional office, I don't talk to the congressman asking that. I ask for the staff who knows me, so that they will respond. If I send them an email, they're going to get back to me right away. That's the relationship you want to have. You don't want to be one out of 1,000 people, and they've got to figure out who they're going to respond to. They're going to respond to you because they know you, and they know you're reputable, and they know you know what you're talking about, and that you are respectful, and that they want to have that type of relationship. So that's it. Be glad to answer any questions that anybody might have. So Colton, back to you.
All right, thank you, Frank. So I'm going to spend some time here both discussing how to make the business case in general, but also more specifically on clean water issues. That is my focus here at ASBC. I work on our clean water campaign. I'm going to go briefly over making the business case, and then I'm going to spend the rest of the time going over some opportunities for engaging with ongoing legislation and also policies at the administrative level on clean water issues. So making the business case, this is where a lot of you that are on this webinar that represent businesses or business leaders have an opportunity to make a case that is different than what most legislators and policymakers are used to hearing. They're used to hearing a lot from environmental groups about why X issue matters, but in general, when they hear from the business community, not always, of course, but they're used to hearing from the business community for more deregulatory and sort of not anti-environmental, but often anti-environmental stances. Generally, there's this consensus or this mistaken notion that businesses and the environmental issues are at odds with each other, that profit and the environment contrast. And we at ASBC make the case that that isn't so. So we provide on our website numerous documents to help make that case for whatever issue it is. We have them on climate, we have them on clean water, obviously, we have them on other non-environmental issues like minimum wage, cooperative ownership. So our website is a fountain of useful information. I provided a couple links there for our two watershed campaigns and the business case documents for those campaigns, and those business case documents outline the economic business case for why clean water is important, why the various different businesses in the region or sectors in the region that rely on clean water and the economic impacts that water pollution is having. Also, if you're in one of these regions and you're interested in joining our campaigns and learning how you can engage more, you can sign on the homepages with the links I provided there. And this webinar and the slides will be available online afterwards at the address down there in the left-hand corner at asbcouncil.org/webinars. We'll get that up in the next few days so you can follow all these links that I've provided. So businesses with a stake in clean water, we make the case that basically any business really has at least some sort of stake in clean water. If you have employees that are drinking water, doing dishes, whatever it is, first of all, you don't want them to get sick. Second of all, water is part of operation costs. So basically all businesses do have some sort of stake, but there are some businesses that are especially rely on clean water. Breweries, most of beer is water, whether the brewery is obtaining their water from municipal waterworks or from well water. If the water is polluted, their operation costs can go up significantly. If it's from a municipal waterworks, they're going to have to clean it before they provide it to their customers, which is going to make the cost of providing it go up. Iowa has been a state in the news the last few years for exactly this, where Des Moines, their cost of water has more than quadrupled several times, or a significant amount. Outdoor recreation suppliers, fishers, boating, if the rivers and lakes aren't accessible, they're going to be put out of business. Same with waterside restaurants, lodging, hotels, etc. If this summer and every summer, lakes across the country are shutting down due to toxic algal blooms, and the tourism economy in those towns and communities are plummeting because no one wants to go stay at a hotel on a lake if the lake is dirty and smells bad and you can't swim in it. Seafood, pretty obvious. All of the rivers feed into the ocean. There's the toxic algal bloom that happens every summer in the Gulf of Mexico, which is highly destructive to all businesses in the region, the fishing industry, and again, the various seaside amenities, recreation suppliers. And this is mostly in the states of Florida and Texas, Louisiana. Every year their economies are devastated. Real estate, property values that are next to polluted water can see their values go down by as much as $85,000, according to various different studies. And so, as a business, this is really, if you know your story, if you're not one of the businesses I've covered here, I'm sure if clean water matters to you and how it matters to you, and that's really what you need to bring to these meetings, because that's the niche that you fill, and it can be a very powerful niche. So I'm going to go over briefly, we have about 10 minutes here that I'll cut out for questions, various different opportunities to engage with policies. And I hope this can be a useful resource for everybody. I might not have time to go over everything, and there's of course things I won't cover, but if I don't have time to go over everything, I hope you can access this PowerPoint and follow the different links and have access to the information just to sort of get inspired for different issues and policies you can engage on. So I'm going to start actually, before I get into current legislative opportunities, opportunities on the administration level. So this is not actually meeting with your legislator. This is sending comments and letters to the EPA and to the administration on various different changes to the Clean Water Act that the current EPA has been undertaking under the Trump White House that are weakening the Clean Water Act and are threatening clean water for all of us across the country. So the Clean Water Act was passed in 1972 with the goal, it was passed on bipartisan basis with the goal of, by 1985, making all waterways across the country swimmable and fishable. Obviously, it did not meet that goal. Various pushback from different administrations since then and a failure of many states to implement have left us with the situation today where waterways across the country many of them are still highly polluted. So here I've listed two ongoing opportunities for that people can leave comments. So here, I'll start with the first one. The Clean Water Rule was passed during the Obama administration to expand the Clean Water Act to apply to more waterways. And the Trump administration has decided to roll that back and pass what many people are calling the Dirty Water Rule, which will actually weaken the Clean Water Act and limit the scope of the waterways it applies to. So we've had a very active campaign opposing this rollback. And if you follow the link that I provided there, you can sign on and keep up to date on how you can engage with that. And so to give sort of a more concrete example of what I mean by engaging with these rollbacks, currently there is a proposal from the administration to weaken the Clean Water Act's regulation of coal-fired power plants. So one is being dubbed the Toxic Water Rule. Another one is the Coal Ash Cleanup Delay. And so for example, the Coal Ash Cleanup Delay is, during the Obama administration, the EPA passed a rule that was going to require all coal-fired power plants to impound their wastewater that was storing coal ash. This coal ash is leaking into the groundwater, and it carries arsenic and various other heavy metals that pose all sorts of health issues and potentially cancer. And so it was going to require them to clean them up within 5 years. And so the current EPA has repealed that rule and it said, no, we're going to give you 10 years instead to clean it up. So, within 10 years, that's, potentially thousands of hundreds of thousands or more people that will have to deal with water that is polluted with these heavy metals. So you can oppose these changes and make your voice heard directly by going to regulations.gov, entering in the docket ID that I've provided here for these different rules, and you can leave your own comment. So you can do this for any rule change that is coming up for this administration. At ASBC, if you subscribe to our newsletters, we will try to keep you updated on any opportunities to comment to rule changes. But also, if you want to follow on your own, EPA does news press releases, and you can keep up to date on the different rule changes they're proposing, and you can make the business case for why we want a strong Clean Water Act. And please do not hesitate to get in contact with me or someone else at ASBC if you need assistance in how to make that business case to the EPA. So there's an opportunity coming up today. The Clean Water Resolution was introduced into the House. So this is a legislative opportunity to voice support for the Clean Water Act. The Clean Water Resolution was introduced by Congressman Pappas and Congresswoman Dingell, and it essentially, if it passed, the House would be, it would be an official resolution of the House that would voice support for clean water and condemn the current administration's rollbacks that are happening right now. It's not concrete action, but it won't stop the EPA from doing what it will do, but it's sort of the best hope we have for legislation at the moment. The Clean Water Act needs to be strengthened. So there is a variety of different organizations, including ASBC, that have a long-term campaign goal of introducing and passing legislation that will strengthen it and prevent future administrations from taking these sort of actions that the current administration is. And that's a long-term thing. So, again, subscribe to our newsletters and stay up to date on opportunities. And we are going to need all the support we can for that fight that is coming up. So one opportunity that we currently have at ASBC to engage with the administration is the National Environmental Policy Act. This is a comment letter that we have written to the administration that opposes their changes to National Environmental Policy Act that would make it weaken the Act's ability to ensure that infrastructure projects do not pose environmental threats. So, for example, oil pipelines, when this Act ensures that they must consider the potential of spills and threats to waterways currently, but the proposed changes would eliminate several of the requirements. And so if you follow that link there, you can sign on to our letter to oppose it. So getting more into concrete legislative actions that we could use your support on. So PFAS are on many people's radar today. The House passed legislation last week that would regulate PFAS, but the Senate has said they will not consider it. So the president has threatened to veto. So call your senator, set up meetings with your senators and demand that they take action on PFAS and introduce their own companion legislation. Because currently there is no companion legislation in the Senate. So that would be the first step. If you're not aware of PFAS, I've put a little information there. We're running out of time here, so I don't have too much to go into details, but definitely a high priority issue. Water infrastructure. There's a strong business case to be made for more federal investment in water infrastructure, especially considering that the private sector could benefit from more federal investment. A lot of these projects are contract with the private sector. So the state water revolving funds are federal funding that go to the states that they can use to give out low interest loans and grants for drinking water and clean water infrastructure. Those funds were set up quite a while ago, but there's opportunity for the federal government to inject more money into them, which is definitely necessary. Currently, the American Society of Civil Engineers estimates that our water infrastructure needs about $105 billion. And if by 2040, this infrastructure deficit is not addressed, 6,000 jobs will be at risk. And the cumulative expected impact to GDP will be $3.2 trillion. So currently there's the Water Quality and Jobs Protection Act in Congress would inject $16.68 billion into stormwater and wastewater infrastructure over the next 5 years. It's not enough money, but it's a start. The House is likely going to pass it soon, but the Senate has not yet introduced a companion bill. So we need you to call your senator, set up meetings, make that case to them that there needs to be more investment in clean water and drinking water infrastructure. So I've listed a few other federal policy opportunities here. I'm going to focus on appropriations. Just in general, a lot of the programs for clean water that currently exist need more funding. And so when you're meeting with your legislator and you're letting them know that you care about clean water and clean water is important to your business and your bottom line for whatever reason, one of the general asks you can make is on the federal and the state level is just more funding for existing programs, both infrastructure programs. There's various different regional programs that give out grants to nonprofits and to the private sector that are doing restoration programs. And there's programs like the Land Water Conservation Fund, which is more broad than just water. It applies to ecosystem restoration and wildlife restoration, but it also affects clean water. Also, Farm Bill conservation programs are another area that can potentially have a huge impact on clean water, but they need more funding. They can, there's lots of opportunity for these programs to fund farmers to undertake practices that reduce agricultural runoff pollution. So state level opportunities, I have less experience here, but Frank and Melanie did go over a few different examples. Stormwater utilities are one area I'll just focus on really briefly, where states can set up stormwater utilities within each community or within counties or within cities that allow them to tax the amount of impermeable surfaces that are on different properties, and then use that funding to fund stormwater infrastructure. So this is the way that states can implement fund stormwater infrastructure, which can have a huge impact on water in the region. And the Chesapeake Bay program, stormwater utility program, has shown that this actually has a positive impact on the economy of the region. For more information for that, just please don't hesitate to reach out. We have some op-eds we've published recently that do more in-depth dive on that issue. All right, so thank you everybody. Give everybody an opportunity to ask questions. Also want to thank you, Melanie, and thank you, Frank, for your time. That was very insightful. And I hope everyone enjoyed and learned something. And so, yeah, everyone chime in with questions. All right, while we're waiting, I've got a question for Melanie. Melanie, do you feel that businesses, you touched on this a little bit, but what sort of special role can the business community bring to making legislative asks on these issues? You know, from your experience as a legislator, do you feel that they do, you know, I think there's a notion that they do carry more weight, maybe than, or they do carry some weight amongst policymakers. Do you feel that's true, and how so?
Yeah, Colton, thank you. Very much true. Oftentimes, social policy legislation or any kind of legislation that's going to cost more money, just to overgeneralize, is going to be supported by, you know, the Democrats, the left, and will be opposed by the Republicans and the right. And so when you have businesses coming down who typically are the bread and butter constituents of the Republicans, if the business community is helping express their support for the initiative, and they can express why it's good for business, that will likely have a strong impact on those legislators. I mean, frankly, whether it's a conservative Democrat or the business-friendly Republicans, it will have an impact on them, because that legislator will no longer be concerned, or at least it will alleviate some of their concerns that this social legislation is going to negatively impact the businesses. So frankly, oftentimes it's just a matter of education. If legislators can understand that that the legislation is going to be to businesses, then that can help the legislator. That can give the legislator comfort and cushion to support the legislation.
Got it. Great. Thank you. So, see, everyone, don't be afraid asking questions. I got another one here for Frank. Um, Frank, in your long history and experience with being an advocate on these issues, where have you seen the most success? Or could you maybe share a story of an area where you feel you've had some impact, or where your networks have had some impact?
Well, a couple of years ago, I was working with the Environmental Defense Fund on trying to protect the EPA budget. If you all remember, President Trump and his administration proposed like cutting the EPA budget by 33% or something of that nature. So, you know, I worked on that issue and met with some of our members of our congressional delegation here in South Carolina, and you know, you find that they may not agree all the time with what is being proposed. So in this case, you know, Senator Lindsey Graham, you know, his office was not inclined to do that type of a massive cut. I mean, they've been pretty good to the EPA in the past, and you know, they pretty much dismissed the proposed 33% cut. And you know, there'd be some working out to do because of the nature of the give and take of the budgetary process. But you know, it turned out that you know, the budget wasn't anything like that. In fact, there was actually a little bit of a bump for EPA when that budget finally got done. So you know, sometimes you won't know what you're going to find until you get there to really find what the sentiment is of the congressperson. And if you find something that you agree on, you know, work with that. And again, I think it's just important to establish the relationship, establish the fact that you are knowledgeable, that you're respectful of them, that even if you don't agree, you can maybe find something in the future you can work on together. Keep the doors open, never slam them shut. So you know, I think that is. Sometimes you don't know what you're going to find when you get into the office. You may even find the staff will tell you stories that you had never heard before of even their own personal insight on a particular issue that might not fit with their bosses. So it is very worthwhile to establish some type of a personal relationship.
Great. So I got a comment here from Patrick Thompson. And so this can be directed maybe at all of us. He says, it's actually not really a question, but I think room for discussion here. He says, much of this discussion has been about how we as advocates should appear or change to address them being the policymakers, not how to appeal to their sense of public service as they work for us. So, you know, this is you're right, Patrick. And I'm wondering, Melanie and Frank, if you could comment on that. I believe what Patrick is trying to get at is that he feels that we are, you know, these public servants aren't really serving us as they should be, which is definitely sometimes the case. And we are trying to almost sort of not con them, but convince, you know, kind of try to convince them that they should actually be working for us. So what do you make of that?
I have some feelings about that. So, you know, certainly a very appropriate comment and insight. I think two things, though. One is to recognize the sheer volume of issues, both policy-wise as well as, you know, local to the home district-wise, that a legislator is focused on. And when you appreciate that, then, you know, you sometimes do have to figure out how you can really get their attention, you know, short of jumping up and down with fireworks in their office. You really do have to figure out how you can, you know, make them realize that of the 100 people that come to see them, you know, these several months, all of whom have issues that are very important to them, why should your issue be the one that's, you know, the one that they're going to spend their time and their political capital on? So I think that's probably the biggest point that I would make.
And Colton, let me just say, it's all from the perspective of whoever's doing the ask about whether they're serving their community. I think we're doing something wrong if we automatically denigrate the position of a member of Congress or even a state legislator because they don't agree with you. They are making that decision based upon their world and who they deal with and who they feel their constituents are and what their constituents want. So you really are trying to give them more information to broaden their perspective if you disagree with them. You're trying to influence their perception of the issue and who's impacted. So I think it's a disservice to automatically think anybody who doesn't agree with us then is not really serving the public. That's our perspective. We've got to make sure that the others, the elected leader, understands that you're part of the public also, and that and why they should be, if they don't agree with you, why should they be concerned about your issue, and try, if you can, find common ground. I think it'll serve you well into the future.
Yeah, thank you for that. A great answer, very insightful. So we are past 1 o'clock here. We have a couple more quick questions we could get to. Frank and Melanie, do you have time to stay a few more minutes, or do you need?
Sure.
Okay, great. So thank you for everyone that's still on here. So Marinus asked a question that my problem is that I have on occasion not been respectful to my congressman. How do I fix that? I'm not sure if this is a serious question, but Melanie, Frank, do you have any?
Yeah, sure. I would say just meet with them in person if possible and apologize. And if they won't take a meeting with you, then just send a letter of apology expressing, maybe why you were so upset and why you acted that way. But legislators are human, and I think when someone apologizes to them, that certainly resonates with me.
Great.
Well, they're not meeting with you. And look, we all run into that. We can't get to see everybody. They're just not going to do that. So that's why it's important to have some type of relationship with the staff person and to develop that so that at some point they will meet with you and at least have the staff person meet with you informally, formally, whatever. You've got to get your foot in the door. But I understand that frustration of saying, yeah, I've asked for these meetings and they don't respond. Well, there's a reason why they're not responding, and it might be they just don't want to talk to you about it. So find somebody in the staff, and maybe they could shed some light on why you're being blocked.
Got it. Yeah, and Marinus did say yes, this was a serious question. So thank you for those answers. One more question we have here from Patrick Thompson. More of a statement, but I think we could still have a brief discussion on it. He says, we need more quantification out here. To be asked about what is the cost of our ideas or solution is only part of the answer. We need to be armed with what is the cost of not doing this. And yes, I think, Patrick, what you're getting at is that quantification is a powerful tool for these conversations, especially with policymakers. And there is actually a lot of research out there that does quantify. For clean water, I brought up the infrastructure cost of not addressing it. There is the cost of the various studies for different sectors and so forth that quantify the. I do agree more research needs to be done. That is something, in my work that would be very valuable to me. And I hope to work with economists and other researchers moving forward to be able to quantify some more of this. But for things like climate change, there's a lot of research out there that quantifies the cost of not acting. Any input on that, Melanie, Frank?
Yeah, absolutely. So as chair of the budget committee for 6 years, I'm certainly appreciative of any evidence that a particular program or policy will save money, generate more revenue, et cetera, et cetera. However, at least at the local level, when you're working with legislators that don't necessarily have a super sophisticated background, I would still suggest that the personal, the person who's been impacted negatively by the policy, or the person who stands to benefit, you know, whether it's that farmer or whether it's that small business person or whoever it might be, when you bring that person to meet with the legislator, I still think that has, you know, almost more impact, or it'll have a different kind of impact, but equally as good as the hard numbers. I think you sometimes just have to know which legislators are going to respond best to the hard numbers, like maybe the budget committee folks. People that are on the budget committee, at least locally, may not really care so much about how much something costs, because they don't see the pluses and minuses and how it all adds up. They just see, I see a policy, it's good, I want it, you know, I'm going to fight for it. And then it's the budget committee members that have to, you know, decide which is the most important. So for the budget committee folks, yes, maybe bring all your hard numbers there. But like I said, for everybody else, I don't know. I'm still leaning toward the personal, individual story.
Got it. Frank, any thoughts on that? It's all right if you don't. we're getting quite a bit over time here, so if you have any last thoughts or comments, Frank and Melanie, speak now.
Thanks for the opportunity.
All right, thank you, Frank. All right, so thank you both. Thank you for everyone for joining. I hope it was a useful conversation, and I've put all of our contact information up here. I know for me personally, do not hesitate to reach out if you have any questions. Again, you will be able to find this webinar in the slides and can access all of the information available in them at asbccouncil.org/webinars, and that should be posted within the next few days. All right, thank you again, and everybody have a great rest of your day.